Hey, Uncorrupt here, taking a look at one of my personal favorite decks, Quest Hunter. If you're familiar with the channel, you've seen this deck featured multiple times throughout different expansions. I just really enjoy the playstyle. I think it's a fun deck overall, and it's been updated for Murder At Castle Nathria, so just going to take a quick look at the list before we get into some gameplay here. And there's really only been 2 new cards added to the deck, total of 4 copies, and that is Stag Charge and Wild Spirits. That's 2 cards in the Wild Seed package. So Stag Charge, it's really been an underwhelming card for me since Castle Nathria came out. It doesn't seem like super great or really anything special. 3 mana, deal 3 isn't all that good. You do get the benefit of having a Wild Seed, and it has synergy with the deck just because it is a damaging spell. Has the benefit of being able to go face, but on its own, Stag Charge really just not all that impressive, but helping us be able to advance the quest and just a spell in general for after the quest is complete. It's going to make the cut in this version of the list. Wild Spirits, arguably the strongest card that Hunter received in Murder At Castle Nathria. Summon 2 different dormant Wild Seeds. It does not advance the quest. It is a spell, however, which means it'll let us refresh our hero power after the quest has been complete. But what makes this card so good is that it puts minions in play. So the way that Quest Hunter can potentially lose games is if it loses control of the board too early and takes too much damage really before the quest is able to be completed. So Wild Spirits allows us to fight for the board more effectively. You know, the 3/1 rush can let us clear an early minion. The 2/5 taunt allows us to fight for board, and it's going to soak damage. And then, of course, you have the 5/4 stag that gives us the bow. Likely all of these minions our opponent are going to want to trade for, which is damage that's not going to be hitting us in the face. And then with the bow, you know, there's nothing wrong with trading for a minion on board, but if that's not necessary, we can punch our opponent in the face, and the 4/2 bow can potentially give us an extra 8 damage. Wild Spirits also has the added benefit of being a nature spell, as you can see here, which means it's going to allow us to be able to charge our multicaster. It just gives us a second nature spell in the deck, the other one, of course, being Shell Shot. So Multicaster has the potential to actually be able to draw 4 cards because now we have Arcane, Fire, Frost, and Nature included in the deck. So a little bit of a bonus there, but definitely a solid card, probably for any Hunter deck in Wild Spirits. Now, one card that you're going to notice is not in the deck and actually doesn't make the cut, I actually have right here, Raj Najan. So just to talk a little bit about this card, best case scenario for this card is that with 10 mana, you play it, and then you play 8 mana worth of spells, and that's going to generate 8 additional damage going into your opponent's face. Realistically, when you play this with this type of deck, it's never going to survive an additional turn. Your opponent's always going to remove it. So best case scenario is going to be 8 damage that this card creates into your opponent's face. But now here's the problems with that. Problem number 1, that's assuming you have 10 mana, and you're not always going to have 10 mana when you play this card. So that cuts down on the optimal 8 damage. Problem number 2, if you're having to spend 2 mana on Raj Najan, then that's likely going to mean that you're going to be able to play 1 less spell on that turn, and that's going to give you 1 less hero power after your quest has been complete. So now the 8 damage is really only looking more like 6 because you're going to end up missing an additional hero power. And of course, most games end before turn 10, so you're probably looking at something like an extra 3, 4, or 5 damage that's going to be created by this card when you play it. The problem with the card is, when you top deck this, you would almost rather it be almost any other card in your deck. It doesn't advance your quest, it's not a spell, so it doesn't refresh your hero power, so there's going to be a lot of times where you would draw this card and it's just dead in your hand. You don't want to spend mana on it if it's not advancing your quest, and it's just taking up space when it could actually be something else. So Raj Najan, not good enough to be able to make it into this version of the list. The rest of it feels pretty tight, though. It's definitely a strong list within the current meta. It is vulnerable to certain decks in the meta, and it's probably also vulnerable to bad draws. I've had games where I just miss on all of my card draw, and then you can have problems potentially completing the quest or finishing off your opponent just because you're not drawing spells to be able to refresh your hero power, and certainly if you're not drawing like direct damage spells to be able to do damage and refresh your hero power. But you know, outside of those little nuances, the deck has been performing pretty well for me, and I think for a lot of other people as well. So we're going to dig in a little bit. I'm going to play a couple of games and try to share some of the wisdom that I've gleaned as I've played this deck out on the ladder. Right off the bat, it looks like we're going to be up against a Mage. There's no doubt in my mind this is going to be Volatile Skeleton Mage. There really is no other kind of Mage. Ideally, you know, we're always keeping a quest, but we want to keep the cheap damaging spells just to be able to advance our quest. And we're actually going to be playing this like a control deck. So we want to be removing the minions from our opponent's side of the board. Just make sure that we're not taking too much damage. Of course, this is a Renathal list, so we've got 40 health. We have to decide whether or not we want to keep the Tavish. Keeping the Tavish against Mage should be fine. Mage does have freezes, so potentially you can run into situations where they can freeze the minions that you're creating from Tavish. So I think I'm just going to not take the chance. If we end up with Tavish in our hands, we would likely play it, as long as we hadn't set our hero power to 0. You don't want to put your hero power to 0 and then change it back to 2 by playing Beaststalker Tavish. But I don't think I want it in this matchup. I think certain matchups it might actually be best, but here maybe not so much. So turn 1 is always going to be just play the hero power, unless you're up against, like, say, a deck that plays a Trog on turn 1 and you have an Arcane Shot in hand, then you would likely just Arcane Shot and then Quest on turn 2. Outside of that, we're just going to be looking to complete the quest quickly and safely. Interestingly enough, our opponent is running Ruined Orb. I wasn't really expecting that. So we have a choice to make here. We could Wound Prey Tracking to advance the quest, or we could just Hero Power here. This is only 30 card Mage, which is interesting. They only have 30 health. I think we just want to... I think we would rather spend our mana on the tracking to try to find more damage spells. It's going to help us complete the quest more quickly, and we miss on that, so we're going to take the second tracking, and we're just going to go ahead and actually track again. See if we can hit something. So not great here. Spring the Trap is a direct damage spell, or a damage spell, so it is going to advance our quest. Unfortunately, it's a little bit more expensive than what we would actually prefer. Our opponent is doing nothing, so I think given the options that we have in our hands, we could certainly aim shot, we could certainly stag shot. The goal is to spend all of our mana here. I think I actually prefer the stag shot here because we want to be able to get our wild seed on the board. That gives it the most time to be able to hatch. Of course, if we hit like the stag, then we're going to need as much time as possible to be able to get that bow in our hand. We actually do hit the stag here, so it's going to be a couple of turns before we have access to it, but that's going to give us some extra damage swinging into our opponent's face. And with our opponent only having, 30 health to start with, certainly that damage is going to add up very quickly. Actually looking more like some kind of a hero power mage, but certainly you would assume that they're running the volatile skeletons. Here we have the Tavish, so we'll be able to play the Tavish, coin it out on turn 5 if we so choose. So we can actually just aim shot and wound prey. Is it even worth it to play the Tavish, I wonder? If we aim shot wound prey and then coin the Tavish on 5, then we're going to actually miss the extra damage from our hero power. I think we're just going to go ahead and spend our mana, play the 2 damage spells here, and then we can make that decision next turn once we find out what our top deck is going to be. So certainly if we want it, Tavish is here. The only thing that makes me a little bit nervous about Tavish against Mage is, Mage having access to freezes like Flurry. If your minions are frozen, you can't do damage. Whereas you can certainly deal damage with hero powers and spells. So we're going to test for a counter spell here. No counter spell. Could be Ice Barrier, could be Explosive Runes, could be Vengeful Visage. Could just Renathal and hero power, or we could actually play the Tavish. I think we just get the Tavish down. I'm likely overthinking it. Tavish just makes you a little bit nervous at certain matchups that have access to board freezes, so... if we go for emergency maneuvers, when this dies, we would be able to get the weapon back, which could be relevant. Our opponent doesn't seem to be playing minions on the board, which leads me to believe that the improved Snake Trap may not see any real use. And we'll just take the Ice Trap here, so... Again, feeling just a little bit weird. when the Stag Spirit hatches, we may actually spring the trap on it just to get our hero power set to 0 and advance our quest. Yeah, so here we see it actually is Volatile Skeleton Mage. So we'll be able to swing. Still not sure what secret this is. I would assume it's going to be Ice Barrier, but we can actually play Kodobane, and our 1 cost is going to be a damage spell, so we'll be able to play the damage spell, and then we'll be able to set our hero power to 0. So that's going to allow us to put the most stuff into play this turn. You can see we hit an Arcane Shot here. So we'll shoot the Arcane Shot, and we'll punch face. And then we'll see if we can roll a Huffer here to be able to do additional damage to our opponent's face. And it is Ice Barrier, so this Ice Barrier is going to block the exact amount of damage of our weapon. And of course, we high roll Huffer because we're good at the deck. So feels like we're in pretty good shape right now. Of course, Varden is also a thing when you're thinking about freezes from our opponent's side of the board. And they actually, our opponent kind of misplayed here. They gave us 2 Huffers by killing the Huffer first, so you can see the emergency maneuvers worked out really well for us here. Can't really ask for much more than that. It feels like our opponent is actually helping us to win the game here. So here we're going to see some freezes coming down as we expected, but we're going to have at least 12 damage going face here. And our opponent choosing not to activate this, that's interesting. So we can actually just piercing shot our own Huffer, I think. Seems pretty good. So we can complete the quest here. The question is, do we want to? So if our opponent runs Theotar, they could actually steal our quest reward, meaning we would never be able to play the quest. So these are definitely going face. We could just go piercing shot and then say maybe Renathal and hero power, and then the following turn we'll be able to stag shot and get the 7/7 down all in the same turn. So bit of an ordering mistake here. I got distracted by talking. I should have hero powered first because it could have been Leok, which would have buffed the damage from the Huffers. So definitely a mistake on my part there. And actually, I got distracted again and didn't realize that we had lethal, and I roped it. So unfortunately, maybe our opponent thinks I'm BMing a little bit. That wasn't the intention. I just got distracted because, hey, I talk too much. But you can see, pretty smooth game. Our opponent was AFK. They basically did nothing, and because they were doing nothing, not putting pressure on us, it was just an easy win for us. So we're going to go on and check out another game. Looks like we're going to be against Shaman this game. Of course, we're keeping the quest. I think we actually keep Wild Spirits in the opening hand. It doesn't advance the quest, but it's just a solid card and being able to get those minions on the board. And of course, we're going to keep the direct damage. So against Shaman, the way that we lose is if they just put too much pressure on the board. And Shaman's certainly capable of rolling out very wide boards early in the game, usually in the form of Murlocs. So we're just going to go ahead and get our quest down on turn 1. It's only 30 card Shaman. A lot of times I'm seeing like the 40 card versions of Shaman, and just a quick note here, if your opponent has 40 starting health, it's really not that big a deal. We have more than enough spells and hero powers available to us in the deck to be able to deal that 40 damage, even without Beaststalker Tavish and, you know, minions, Huffers, so on and so forth. Question here is, do we want to actually play the Barbed Nets? A very strong play that I don't see Shaman actually make is to just play the Piranhas. Like, you can play out the Piranhas and put 6 damage on the board with only 3 mana, and if you can't answer that, then potentially you can get in trouble. So I think I just want a tracking. And I think we're just going to take the quick shot, although there is some merit to Mark Shot just because you discover a spell. The next turn, you know, if we feel like we're in trouble, cheap damaging spells are going to be the way to go. Turn 3, likely just going to be a Wild Spirits. try to get some minions in play of our own. It's going to help us be able to fight for the board against this Shaman. So again, we're likely just going to play like a control deck. We're going to remove our opponent's minions, and then once we get our quest reward down, most likely all of our damage is going to be going to our opponent's face, and we're going to look to close the game out. So that's pretty much the pattern that you're going to see in every single game. Occasionally, after we get our hero down and complete the quest, we may have to, use some spells or some hero powers on the board just to make sure that we don't die. But a lot of times, you're just going to be killing your opponent, usually over the course of about 2 turns, depending on the cards and card draw that we have access to at that time. Our opponent considering carefully what they want to do, and they are just going to start sticking some piranhas on the board, so likely a good move here. So our tentative plan was Wild Spirits, which is still pretty good, but we could bunker to start drawing our traps and cheap spells, of course. It also serves to thin the deck to make sure that we can draw into like our aim shots and, some of this maybe stronger damaging spells to be able to complete the quest. But we could actually just bunker and barb nets on this guy, start working on advancing the quest. Other option, of course, is Wild Spirits. I think I like the idea of drawing cards here, though. And then we're going to kill the highest attack. So if they want to, they'll be able to play another Piranha, and they will be able to, hit us for 2, but that's not a whole lot of damage. We're not worried about that. Probably what we are worried about would be a coin Wild Paw Cavern play. With this only being a 30-card list, I'm not sure that our opponent's going to be running Wild Paw Cavern. It seems like that card is not something that's played in, maybe not even in the majority of Shaman decks now, but it probably should be. That card is just really good in a lot of matchups. Really good tempo. I think it feels like Shaman is always concerned about tempo. So this is actually looking like an Evolve deck. We want to make sure we remove this because we don't want this getting changed into a different 10-drop. Evolve can actually just end the game if this turns into like a Sire Denathrius or, the 8/8 Rush, Death Rattle, summon an 8/8. That can be really bad. So the question is, how do we want to go about it? If we quick shot, we could then ping this, or we could just piercing shot. And I think the play that we want to make is piercing shot. It spends all of our mana. We spend our expensive spell. It removes the minion, and of course it does 2 damage face. We're still likely going to want to play the Wild Spirits soon, just because we want to be able to get those wild seeds on the board so that they can hatch. So we would assume that our opponent is holding either the Muck Pool's location to evolve, or possibly the Primordial Wave also to be able to evolve. So we want to, again, it's the same game plan as always, but we really want to try to limit what our opponent is able to do here. So we can actually just shell shot to remove all of this. We can even shell shot quick shot to advance our quest 2 times. It feels like we really need to remove this board, but we're not allowed to, doesn't allow us to be able to play the Wild Spirits. But we're just going to focus on removing the board, and we kind of won the 50-50 there, so we can actually just hero power face here. I think I want to save the quick shot because we're likely going to want to remove the next 3/4 coming out off of the Wild Paw Cavern. Certainly if the Wild Spirits hits a stag, we would like to be able to punch our opponent in the face, but it's starting to feel like this card is maybe not going to see play. It's going to depend on what our opponent does and what's in our hand. So we have the tiny toys here. And we really don't want the Primordial Wave to evolve these at all. Fortunately, it looks like it is going to be able to evolve some of them. But we can get a free hero power. So we're just going to go ahead and start removing some stuff. There's the free hero power. We're going to do that. Then we will be able to quick shot. hero power here, and then I'm just going to play the Wild Spirits. If we hit the 3-1 rush, we can actually remove this as well. And you can see we do hit it, so we've been able to successfully remove all of those drops off the board. It's possible that our opponent's going to get the Rat King back at some point. By that time, it may just be too late. We can complete the quest next turn, but we have to be careful. We want to make sure that we don't hit like a Mutinous. Our opponent may run Mutinous in this deck. I'm honestly not sure if Mutinous is included in these evolved decks or not, especially the 30-card version. So we're going to take a little damage here. That can be removed just with a hero power, so ideally we top deck either a 1 or 2 damage spell. So that we can complete the quest and get the 7/7 in play. And again, our opponent's likely just going to be looking to Primordial Wave to make some type of a board, so... we hit an Arcane Shot. I think we still just want to remove as many minions from we can from our opponent's board, and I think it's going to be these two guys because they are the highest mana cost, so we want to remove those to make sure that they don't get evolved into something better. So we're going to do this. We'll go ahead and ping, and that's going to complete our quest. So we get our 7/7 down, and then we are going to... I believe we're actually going to Freezing Trap. And I think I want to still remove a minion. Just trying to limit our opponent's ability to be able to get big minions on the board. At this point going forward, we're going to be trying to put as much damage into our opponent's face as we can to be able to win. Debatable, we could have potentially hero powered our opponent, but it just felt better to be able to remove that minion. Likely the 7/7 gets frozen or is unable to attack. Maybe there's a taunt in the way, maybe it gets devolved. But if our opponent is having to put resources into the 7/7, that's going to be damage that's not going into our face, which is going to give us, hopefully, as much as an extra turn. So we can see a lot of Piranha here. We have an Explosive Trap, so they can evolve the Piranha, which even still would only be 2 drops. We are going to be taking a little bit of damage here. We could get the Rat King back if he wanted. But I think we're still okay. We're healthy enough that this shouldn't be too bad. We have to be aware of weird things, though, if our opponent is running something like a... something like a Bloodlust. So we can actually... Let's see. We still have 3 traps left in the deck. So we're going to hero power first. And then we're going to wound prey on this, and then spring the trap for the honor kill to be able to get 2 more cards out of our deck. So we hit an explosive and a freezing. And we're just going to go ahead and play the rest of the cards that we have in our hands here that we're able to. So unable to play the explosive because there's already one in play, but that's fine. We feel relatively safe. If our opponent just attacks face with what they have on the board, almost all of it's going to die. And if they're just attacking to remove the 7/7, then again, that's just damage that's not going into our face. So at this point, we're really hoping that we hit some kind of card draw. We've got 2 Furious Howl, we have 2 Multicaster, and we have Kodo Bane. So 5 out of 23 is going to be card draw for us. And kind of hoping that our opponent will spend 3 mana replaying the 1/1. Not gonna happen. But they're also going to take 2 damage from the Explosive Trap. We're also kind of hoping that our opponent just doesn't have Brucon. Brucon is kind of bad news. It's going to be 5 armor. They're likely going to heal with for the 6 health with that hero power. Then they could potentially roll healing the rest of the game as well. So, especially because we're on low cards, we're really hoping to dodge Brucon. There's something Yeah, they had held that in their hand since the beginning, so likely that was either Brucon or maybe Denathrius, if they're running Denathrius. Our little 1/1 might get to attack. And so they do. Another Spring the Trap. We only have one trap left in the deck, so it's going to put our Ice Trap into play. We're going to make sure we do this in the right order. And we're going to remove this attack buffing totem. Face again. Face. Another Explosive Trap. And we're going to go face here. So an alternate line of play would have been to use 2 hero powers, remove this, and set this to 2 so that it dies to the Explosive Trap. But then we miss 4 damage face. We're at 19 health, but we're not really expecting our opponent to be able to kill us, I don't think. They could also run something like a Battleground Battlemaster, but we should be okay here. We're just going to have to see what they do, and we're still kind of hoping for some card draw. If we miss on card draw, I think I may have already mentioned this, if we miss on card draw, it's possible that we're actually just unable to win the game. So we might have to use some hero powers to try to clear minions to maybe buy ourselves an extra turn if that's going to be the case. Certainly it looks like we're not dying. We don't expect a lot of direct damage spells coming out of this type of Shaman deck. So it feels like it's really going to come down to what we top deck. If we don't have lethal, the Rat King just has to be removed, though. So that taunt prevents 1 damage there. So we hit an aim shot here, which actually gives us lethal. So nice top deck. It was not card draw, but it was enough to be able to get us there in the end. So you can see if you draw dead there and you're not drawing any card draw, you can potentially just run out of resources and not be able to kill your opponent. So particularly for this game, we were a little bit lucky that our opponent was actually 30 health Shaman rather than a Renathal deck. If they had played a Renathal deck with 10 extra health and the game had played out exactly like this, then you could see the aim shot wouldn't have been enough. Our opponent still would have been at 10 health. And, we would have likely had to try to use a hero power to kill some minions and then hope to hit, some of this card draw maybe on the next turn. So it would have been definitely very rocky if we had missed on the card draw. So definitely one of the pitfalls of the deck. Nothing we can really do to address that from a deck building standpoint or really a gameplay standpoint. It's just going to be one of those things where if you don't hit card draw, potentially you're going to lose. But this is the Murder at Castle Nathria version of Quest Hunter. Again, it's one of my personal favorite decks. I hope you enjoy it too. Thank you for watching, and just get out and have some fun with Murder at Castle Nathria. Don't get caught up in your rank, so early on in the expansion. It's fun to just play different stuff and experiment. That's what I've been doing, and I would encourage you to do the same. Thanks again for watching. Good luck out on the ladder.